Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our October 2023 SHRS Innovation Institute Seminar Series. We're really fortunate today to have Tony Torres with us. Tony is an entrepreneur in residence here at the Pitt Innovation Institute. And he's going to talk to us about startup companies, and in particular, the Pitt Ventures Startup Academy. And Tony knows a lot about starting up companies. He founded and he currently operates a company called Free Radicals. It's a consulting firm and investment holding company focused on sustainable building and construction methods and materials. Prior to starting up Free Radicals, Tony co-founded Triventes, I'm not sure which Tony. It's a small cap investment firm. And he was also senior consultant at Headwaters, a merchant banking and advisory company. And if that's not enough, in the last 5 years, Tony's been focused on building a global construction company business. And in that business, he's been focusing on identifying critical and capable partners to successfully start up technology-based companies. So Tony's all about startups, and he's here today to tell us about this Pitt Ventures Startup Academy. It's a Pitt program to support startup formation. And he's going to talk about everything from incorporating to team building, market analysis, regulatory affairs, company finance, and fundraising. So, Tony, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave.
Absolutely. I think we got a good number of people here, so we can manage some discussion.
Perfect. Let me make sure. Okay. So just as Dave mentioned, what I want to cover is I want to give you a little bit of background on the history of how we got to where we are. Specifically talk about the second gear program as it was and how it operated and its outcomes, which were primarily successful. And then we'll get into specifically what the Academy objectives are, the outline of the program. And there are prerequisites to joining Academy, which is a big difference from second gear. And then we'll talk about how we want to implement it, and we'll have time for any questions that you may have. So from a background standpoint, what we're really trying to do is increase both the quantity and the quality of Pitt spinouts. And we recognize a great opportunity for the university. We've had over 100 spinouts in the last 5-6 years, so it's not something that's new to us. And most of the EIRs at OIE really focus on helping our PIs internally and our startup companies get out the door. But quantity is just a number. And I think before we focused quite a bit on the quantity, but what we found was that quality was just as important. And by quality, I'm really zeroing in on the ability of these companies to raise funds to get through what's called the valley of death. So the valley of death is a simple concept in venture capital. Typically what happens, and if we look at it, I know most of our projects are in life sciences. In life sciences, a lot of times an investor will come back and say, hey, can we see your in vivo data? So they're not necessarily, they want to see in vitro data, but they always ask for in vivo data. Our problem internally is that costs money. Typically, let's just say on average, at least $80,000 to $100,000. The PIs, the programs internally don't have that money, so they want the investor to put in that money, but the investor says, hey, I'm not going to put in that money till I see the in vivo data. Well, we don't have the in vivo data unless we have the money, and you get into this cycle of where's the money, where's the data, and that's what we call the valley of death, because it just kind of tends to simmer and stop developing at that point. What we want to do is really to upgrade what used to be the second gear program. Now, if you remember, second gear was a relatively new program that was used after our teams went through first gear. And so what we want to do is upgrade that program. Will not be called second gear any longer. It'll be called Academy. And what we'll offer is a pretty rigorous curricula based on milestones, which is different from what second gear was. What we hope, the objective, the results will be capable spin outs, and by capable, I mean both with good product and the funds necessary to get them to the next step. And that'll be critical for them to sustain themselves into the future and grow. Further on the history of second gear, that program began in 2015 as part of the National Science Foundation I-Corps Site Award. It was specifically aimed at accelerating spin-out teams which completed the first gear program. We targeted between 4 and 8 teams a year. Initially, it was structured as an 8-week session culminating in a project pitch competition. And there was NSF money at that time between $5,000 and $10,000 for the winning team. And the money was specifically targeted at customer discovery. The program evolved, really evolving into a recurring one-on-one mentoring session with the EIR teams. It was very fluid. We didn't have a specific agenda. We kind of targeted to what the teams were trying to do. There was no session timing or limits, but there was some additional potential funding of $5,000. So a couple of points here. First of all, the NSF I-Corps program was started again this year. John and Sarah runs that program for us, and it's broken up into 2 sessions. There's what's called the local hub program, which is a 4-week, about 7 hours a week that's expected from the teams, and it's entirely focused on customer discovery, requiring the teams to do about a minimum of 30 interviews with potential customers or partners in the Envision Ventures. So that program's still in place. Anybody interested in that program can go to the website or talk to John and Sarah directly to find out more about what's in place today. So the Ventures program, the Academy program, is then really focused at taking those teams that have spun out or have the data that would be generated in first gear to move into the Academy program. Basically, if you look at the history of the original second gear, it was for the most promising first gear teams that really wanted to move forward and potentially start up a company. It further extended the customer discovery. It provided an EIR to that team that would work with the team to develop, I would say, primarily a commercial translation plan, and also to obtain applications for either Phase 1 Ventures, which was a startup out of Philly, not a startup, incubator, and work further with potentially the National I-Corps team, which was the second part of this. So you went to Hub, the local program initially, like I said, it was 4 weeks. The national program, which was only by invitation, is a 7-week program. And that program did provide $50,000 to do additional customer discovery. And it was pretty strenuous from the standpoint that you had to do at least 100 customer discovery interviews in those 7 weeks. So it required quite a bit of work from the teams. And by the way, that program still exists, and at Pitt, we're still sending teams to that program. I think there's at least one accepted right now, and potentially a couple more that have applied and are looking to be accepted. As far as the performance metrics at that time, it was that we focused on with second gear was how many teams, how many participants, numbers that actually went from the hub, the local, to the national, and most importantly, the number of SBIR and STTR proposals. Just as a side note, going through that national I-Corps program increased your chances of receiving an SBIR, STTR. From traditionally, I would say the hit rate was less than 15, 20%. Going through National I-Corps increased your chances of getting an SBIR to over 50%. So it was a good way to potentially obtain that additional capability from the National I-Corps program. Let me stop there for a second. Any questions on that background? Because I'm going to move forward now more towards Academy and what we're trying to do. All right. Yep, sorry. This is just a quick look at teams that went through second gear. The ones on the left are actual startups that are in some shape, form, or fashion still in place, growing. Some of them have raised money. Some of them are in the midst of trying to raise additional money. But those are the startups that successfully spun out of the university. We have currently a pretty good list of the next ones that could potentially spin out. Doesn't mean that they will, but they're moving towards that spin out plan. And we continue to help them as much as we can. And there's the did not spin out. And I'll say here that some of these, like the first one there, the peptide antibiotics, actually were participating with investors for, I'd say, 12 to 18 months. Some of these had to raise SBIR money before the investor would move forward, and they were not able to do that. And then that basically resulted in the potential company not spinning out. But the key is that the majority of teams participating in second gear went on to create a startup. So what are the objectives for the Startup Academy? Like I said, we really want to increase the number of sustainable Pitt startups. And sustainable there being the key word, to me, sustainable meaning that they're able to raise funds and move forward with the milestones in their company. So stakeholder buy-in, to a structured and professional program, we feel will bring lots of value. Specifically because it's milestone driven. That's not something we focused on previously on the old second gear program, but this one will be very focused on milestones and goals. It will continue to receive adequate support from EIRs, both from their expertise and oversight and direction. And our hope is that it'll result in high quality businesses and investor pitches, as well as a thorough and detailed commercial translation plan that creates an investable, fundable startup, right? So that the whole plan here is that now you're able to go in front of an investor and make a pitch that demonstrates a high performance, talented startup team, company team that knows where it's going, knows what it needs, and can convince the investor to put in the needed funds to get there. As far as metrics that we'll be looking at is, we want to increase our year-over-year targets. We've been as high as 21, 22 startups. We've been at as low, I think last year was probably the lowest we've had in a while, and I think it had a lot to do with COVID, and we were down to 12. This year we had, I believe it was 15, or this year we were targeting 15. So we see the increase in teams starting up again. But again, from a metric standpoint, did we create a successful spin-out, which again is a spin-out with funding. And we also are looking at the number of investors that we're bringing into the program and making them well aware of what Pitt can do. All right, so here's a flow diagram of how Academy is going to operate. So there will be an application to Academy, so it won't be simply just a discussion, but we will have, and I'll show you more what the requirements are from those applications, and you'll either meet those requirements or not. If the requirements aren't met, that's not the end of it. You know, we'll ask you to update the entry requirements. It's usually data. It's usually customer feedback. If there's been no customer discovery done in the application to Academy, then we're going to ask the teams to go back and do some of that discovery before they reapply. If the teams meet the criteria, then obviously accepted into Academy. We go through an orientation program, and Academy itself results in a number of modules. You can see here about 10 modules that we go through, and I'll talk in more detail about what those are. Then coming out of that, you'll see that the startups have in place a management team, either a license or an option, the ability to incorporate or already being incorporated with a thorough business plan and a great pitch deck to go to investors with. At the end, we hope then that means it'll be a funded operating entity with the funds required to move forward. Any questions here? So specifically, this is the program outline. And each one of those, I put hours there on targeted timing. The key thing is we really want to try to get the teams through Academy in 12 to 18 months. Previously in second gear, we've had teams that have been in second gear for 2 to 3 years. We want to try to avoid that. We want to try to move teams forward as best we can. And I said we'll do that through goals and milestones. So the first meeting you can expect to have with Academy is a background check, looking at the work that was done. Hopefully the teams have gone through first gear or now the regional I-Corps program, the hub program. The second meeting then is to take that data that's in place and develop a program that then says, okay, the needed prereqs are there and we're approved to move forward with Academy. So the first module, the first work module, is to focus, and really the first two, on the business model canvas, which, if you're familiar with first gear hub, it is one of the requisites that you need to have. And then we'll update the gap definition, meaning what are your gaps? What are you missing that we need to have you be successful in Academy? The second part of that module then is just really focusing on gap definition, making sure that we set forth the milestones requirement to meet the gaps. Then we move into business plan development for a couple of modules. Well, and I should say that so those first three workshops are, somewhere between 12 and 16 hours worth of work that we need to go through together. This is not the work that goes on afterwards. This is the work that goes on with the working team, including EIRs or mentors or whatever we feel needs to be involved to make the team successful. So module 2 is like I said, just looking at those gaps and making sure that we put the right work in place, the right targets in place to fill the gaps. The business plan development is something that teams typically have a challenge with. The first part of that business plan is what's the company and what's the product. So that should tell you why it's important to have the discovery prior, because if we don't know what your product is, if we don't know who your customers are, then it's very hard to put together this business plan. The second part of the business plan, which I will tell you is a big challenge, especially for the technical folks we traditionally work with, and that is the finance and operations. How is the product going to be produced, or how are the prototypes being produced? And then what do the finances look like for this specific type of company to move forward? So you can see that we've got 12 hours allocated for that. I teach entrepreneurship at the engineering school, and I can tell you that in my classes, the biggest gap that I've always seen is when we talk about financing, whether it's a profit loss statement, a balance sheet. Most of the technical teams don't know how to do that, have never had to do that. So in Academy, we plan on putting time and resources for the teams to be able to develop that. And by the way, the investors always look at that. It's a key part of any pitch deck. Then we move into choosing the support team. One of the challenges that we have and we've seen is that typically PIs don't want to go full-time with a startup company. They usually want to take a position either as a chief medical officer, chief technology officer, or they want to be on an advisory board, but they don't want to take a full-time position in a company. Now, I think, as you guys know, Pitt allows you to spend up to 20% of your time working on a startup. So that 20% is what we're looking at in from a support, from an individual and a team perspective. Then we get into actually talking about positions, people, skill sets, and team building, and that is a critical part. Again, the investors, if you ask them, will almost always say that they'll rather bet on a team than on the technology. So we go into this discussion with that in mind, making sure that we have the appropriate skill sets involved to make the company successful going forward. Then we switch to fundraising. Where's the money going to come from? Who are the investors that are most appropriate? Is it dilutive funding, which by that I mean investors like venture capitalists or angels, or is it non-dilutive funding like grants and SBIRs, STTRs? Then we jump into are you going to take a license or an option, and talk about the pros and cons of each one of those. And typically for most of our teams, we would take an option first and then eventually a license, but we would talk about that there. At this point, we would introduce the teams to the and really ask them to identify a legal partner, because now you start getting into contracts. And a lot of times with the teams that have no real experience in the legal aspects, we want to try to partner them with a legal team that has the experience to help them go where they want to go. That legal team will also help in Module 9, which is incorporating. Should it be a limited liability company, a partnership, an Inc? What kind of corporation makes the most sense? And for most of our cases, an Inc is the desired outcome, because in an LLC you can't have dilutive investors. So we talk about that. We talk about those options and what's best for the plan going forward. Then we talk about equity. How do you split up the equity pie with the different participants in the company? And also look at other financial considerations like, loans and other ways to fund the company. And then lastly, on the wrap up, it's okay, now you're really not at the university anymore. You're leaving this orbit and entering a new orbit, which is quite different and quite demanding. And we want to prepare you for that. So if you look at it overall, it's about 80 hours that we expect the teams to put into it prior to joining the program. It's important that the teams understand that it's going to require real work and real commitment and that most of that work and commitment comes from the teams. A lot of times we see that the teams think that OIE, the EIRs are going to do that work for them, but really to be a successful spin out, that work has to be, the sweat equity has to be done by the participating team. So again, we want to shoot for a 12 to 18 month maximum. We feel some teams can probably do it in 6 or less. But on average, my guess is it's going to take about a year or so to get a team to where they want to be. Any questions here? Boy, you guys are quiet. Hopefully you're eating a good lunch. All right, so how do we implement the program? So it'll be, as I said, it'll be an application-based program with defined prerequisites for acceptance and entry. While the program's self-paced, as appropriate, we want timely progress. In second gear, we just had a lot of teams that got to a point when the going got tough. We lost focus, we lost interest sometimes because it was a lot of work. And so this pacing is important in order to keep everything moving forward and not having to revisit certain areas after taking some time off. We really want to keep things moving on a regular basis. We will definitely leverage other programs from other venture groups, but really, I talked about iCore. We have a big program in curated content, which I'll show you how you can access that. And those are different modules that you can take yourself and with your team to learn about different aspects of venturing. We will also use mentors and external experts as necessary and appropriate. And I'll show you in a minute what I mean by that. But in general, the program will be team taught by the EIRs and other OIE resources. We launched the program, we announced it September 11th, and we will be open for applications on a quarterly basis. And the first set of applications will open today. And I'm hoping that some of you will join us. As I mentioned, the prerequisites are probably the most challenging part of this to be part of Academy. And so we strongly advise that the teams complete the iCore program, and that's really the regional, the hub program. We're not requiring them to participate in the national program, although that dovetails quite well with Academy. The background materials that we really would like to see is there's IP in place. We will not work with non-Pitt IP. We often have requests, especially for consulting type of companies, of individuals within Pitt that have a specific expertise and they want to start a company outside of the university. But if there's no IP in place, and by that I mean invention disclosures or provisional or PCT patent applications, then we normally would not have those teams in Academy. The other thing that we typically don't have that would be quite helpful is some sort of prototype or, like I said, some form of scientific validation. Here, it may be in vitro if we have in vivo data that is obviously much more advanced and makes the fundraising quite different. So some kind of early stage innovation and prototype is quite helpful. I mentioned customer discovery, and in the local, the regional program, the hub program, they require a minimum of 30 interviews. The national program, as I mentioned, is 100. But we're willing to work with the hub, the smaller number of interviews to start an academy. We also would look at a completed business model canvas. And if you remember those first two modules that I mentioned, we would help in building that. So if it's not totally in place, well, we recognize that we'll have to help some teams get that in place. So, the business model canvas is an evaluation of the technology's commercialization potential. That's why we want to see it, so that we can kind of know who's the customer, what's the product, why are they going to buy it. And it's not just, a lot of times we get technical teams that think they have a great invention, and they might, but we want to validate that with the entity that's going to put the dollars in place to buy that product and move it forward. So we expect the teams to be fully committed to the program and move along the startup path in a diligent and purposeful manner. That's when I mentioned, anywhere from 6 to 18 months. We want to see that moving forward. Again, where we see teams kind of stop and go, we forget a lot of things when we go, and then we have to look at them when we come back into it. We try to avoid that as much as possible. And really, the inability to commit to these prerequisites and commitments, we would probably ask you to pause from Academy until such a time that the teams are really ready to fully engage, because we just don't have the resources to help a lot of teams. We're very resource limited, and therefore we have to leverage a lot of external resources, and we want those external resources to feel like their time is well spent and well utilized. So as far as the actual teaching resources, we have a group of 4 EIRs in the Institute, myself, Dan, Priya, and Paul. Most of you, I'm sure, know Paul. Dan's been with us for about a year and a half, and Priya just joined I think it was about 6 months ago. Dan has tremendous background in life sciences and in startups and in venture capital. Priya has started one company herself here locally in Pittsburgh, and has a lot of local knowledge on fundraising and what it takes to be successful in Pittsburgh. Other sources, as I mentioned, there's curated content, which is if you go to our website, and I've got the website link there, you'll see there's all kinds of really great resources, short vignettes that you can watch, and they'll get you up to speed quite quickly. We'll use a lot of those in class, but they're there for your own self-education at your own pace. We interestingly enough, when we made the announcement back in September, we had a lot of our legal partners say, "Hey, how can we help?" And I mentioned 3 here. There's probably 8 or 10 different legal firms that have helped and are willing to help going forward. These would be companies that would help you with, should I do a license? Should I do an option? What do my contracts look like? What do my fundraising contracts look like? How do I set up equity in the company? That gets into a lot of the technical stuff that's important for teams to really go out and get help with, because we don't have that capability internally. We've just started a new mentor program, which Priya is running, and we're trying to upgrade the availability of both mentors and advisors for our teams, and we'll certainly use that as needed in specific targeted areas for the teams that join Academy. And there are other Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship resources, like the Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence and the Big Idea Center, that also have program and resources that we'll leverage. The other thing that I hope you find is going to be very important is that we have good relationships with VCs, venture capital firms, with incubators, with accelerators. So we would really look to work with these investors and accelerators, incubators, to help you in any questions you may have. In the past, we've gone to venture capital firms and said, "Hey, look, we're not ready to raise money, but we want you to look at this technology through a pitch that we'll do, and we want you to give us feedback on where we have to go for you to be interested in investing." And I think that'll be a great asset to any company figuring out what they need to do and what they need to pull together. And lastly, I've got here is we've got some joint programs with CATS where their entrepreneurship MBA students are participating with second gear and now academy teams and putting in people resources to really help with the finance, the marketing, and some of the softer skills that are typically strong technical teams don't have access to. So that's kind of an overview of where the teaching resources will come from. All right, I was just looking at the chat because there was a few things on there. Let me just check real quick. Hold on. All right, Dan put both the iCore and the curated content links there if you want to copy them so that you can take a look at that later. They're, as I mentioned, they're great resources. All right, so I have here listed questions that we've gotten into before. I'm more than happy to just go down this list and answer them for you. But again, I want to stop and just check to see if there's any questions from the audience.
Tony, some of my questions are on your list, but one that's not there that I thought you might have a thought on is has to do with the involvement of students in the process. Is that something you recommend, encourage, or discourage, or sort of what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, I really think that it's great to have students. A lot of the times the PIs don't have all the available time to put in the program. And we've had students do great work in developing those knowledge and those capabilities. And it's a great way for students to learn. It's a great way to, I would say, I'm trying to think while I speak here, we have had some students go with spin-outs. And they've actually, you know, if you look at, and I'm more familiar with the engineering school, you know, we offer entrepreneurship classes and programs, certificate programs. And really, if you look at the number of students that actually go into a startup, it's very low. It's less, it's about 1% or less. And so participating in a program like this and participating in a potential startup is a great way for students to learn, and it's win-win. The PI gets help, and the students learn quite a bit of what's happening. So I strongly encourage students to participate. Okay, I have a question from April. How many of the spin-out startups have successfully marketed their product? I think all of those that I put on that list, let me see if I can go back to it. So I don't know. Let me, there's a few of these. This was only what was really in second gear, but I would say there's probably actively right now 6 to 10 spin-outs that are, come on, sorry, not marketing their product. I don't think, at least since I've been here, we don't have companies that are marketing their product, but they're well along the pathway to do that. I don't know if any of the other EIRs in the meeting, I think I saw Paul and Dan. If you want to jump in from what you know, as far as, are there any that have successfully marketed their product? And I'm assuming by that we're talking about they're selling, they're transacting at this point in time. At least for me, I can say to that, no, right now. Paul or Dan, do you have any comments there? Yeah.
Yeah, Tony, I think there's a couple that I would say are close. Parenting While Black is coming out of the gate with with a customer, so that one would have their first customer. Activity Rhythm Solutions is still developing, although they have a product that's pretty much market ready already. And I think contract engineering is getting close to
Yeah.
product ready as well.
Expressive painimation is also getting close. So some of these are close. Sensible photonics is close, but they're not generating revenues at this point that they're supporting the company. So they're close, but we're not quite there yet. Yeah, feel free if I've got the chat open if you've got any questions. I'll quickly go through these and then we'll come back and see if you have more. Well, I went through what the requirements are, so I don't think we need to cover that. What happens if we don't have the needed prerequisites? We'll work with you to help you develop those prerequisites. If you haven't gone through any of the ICOR programs, we would ask you to join those and work with John and Sarah. And that's a very successful program. So there are resources that we can work together with to get you into Academy.
Tony,
Tony,
just to add to that, for people in SHRS, going through the SHRS challenge will get you a lot of those prerequisites, and so that that SHRS challenge is going to open up in November. So that's a great opportunity to get to the point where you can enter this the Academy.
Yeah, that's spot on. A lot of your the challenges requisites really will match these quite nicely. So that's a great point, Dave. How long can I expect the team to be in the program? Like I said, it depends on the team, but probably somewhere between 6 and 18 months. We will be team teaching. We will consider the team specific needs and objectives. That's what it'll be nice about this. It's not like a program where you come in and listen to a lecture and it may apply and may not apply. We will very much work with the team and what it's done and what it's trying to get done to make sure we accelerate the route to market. Can I drop out? Sure. We would hope you don't. But certainly at times, things always come up that aren't planned and it may require that, but hopefully we can work through it and have everybody raise a bunch of money and have a very successful company. How long will it take our team to be in front of investors? Again, that depends, but I would say if everything is as we expect, you're going to be looking at least 8 to 12 months before you have a pitch deck and your business plan ready to go in front of an investor. The next one we get quite often, will there be subsidies for participation in the program? We no longer have the subsidies we had in second gear. So the answer, unfortunately, that is no, but there are other programs either in your own school, as Dave mentioned, in those competitions. We also have some GAP Fund, the Chancellor's GAP Fund program, which I believe is it's a total of $250,000 a year, and the awards are in the range of 25 to 75, and those are aimed at specifically at getting you the validation data that you don't have. The valley of death description, I would say, in my mind, the way I look at that GAP program is that they'll give you some money to get you through the valley of death, so you have the data that the investor wants at the right time, the right place. Will this compete with LifeX or InnovationWorks? No, I think that this will make your applications to LifeX or InnovationWorks, put them in much more solid footing, and will help tremendously in getting the teams into those programs. See, we have another question. Is Academy solely for STEM? Focused businesses? No. As Paul mentioned, Parenting While Black is not a STEM business. there's the answer to that is no. We're open to any technologies that have Pitt IP, and that Pitt IP can be software, it can be programming, like with Parenting While Black. Painimation is another one that's a combination of programming and software. So no, we're open to any kind of startup.
Tony, you mentioned SBIRs and STTRs, and I'm wondering, if you could comment on sort of the timing of, seeking that funding. Like, would you want to apply for a phase one of the SBIR or STTR, before or during this process, or do you think it's generally too early and you'd apply for those grants afterwards?
No, I think that some teams will definitely want to apply during the program. We have actually Paul, who's on, is our expert in that area, and will play a significant role in recommending for some of the teams to apply to SBIRs, STTRs. In a lot of cases, that non-dilutive approach, it could potentially be much better than trying to go in front of venture capitalists. By the way, there's certain venture capital companies. One that comes to mind is called VIC, and they currently have looked at 2 or 3 programs. They actually, that's what they do. The typical program is they come to you and the team and they say, hey, we like this. Let's together put together an SBIR application. They typically have experts, grant writers for those sorts of applications. And then the way it works, if the application is successful, then a lot of these venture capital funds will match the SBIR money and kind of accelerate the development through. So that's a great question, and we would definitely encourage the teams, if it makes sense, to do that. Like I said, that's one of the reasons we have Paul involved, because he knows what SBIRs, STTRs are looking for. And by the way, we also have teams that have done the traditional grants and applications to try to move the innovation forward. So all of that is an option that can be looked at. All right, April. Some software products fall into a category the FDA calls digital health technologies and are regulated as medical devices. Does the Academy have the resources for FDA? Yeah, so that is part. I didn't put it in the presentation, and I'll write myself a note, but regulatory support will be part of that outsource. Sorry, I was writing something down here. Let me just go back here. So either this mentor advisors, definitely FDA expertise is included there, and we would very much look forward to introducing you to some of these advisors to help you understand what has to be done from an FDA standpoint. And it's not just for software, but for anything that has to go through FDA. I'm sorry. Anything else? All right. So definitely a more disciplined approach, requiring team commitment to make this go forward. We will adjust as we learn. While a more structured program, we know that other successful programs run with a higher level of structure and expectations have been much more successful. We've seen more success in the structured programs than in the programs that kind of meander along. So we're looking for commitment from the teams. The bottom line is we're just trying to increase the number and the funding of these startups. And I see I got another question. Is there a list of Pitt businesses you've worked with that I personally have worked with? Robin, is that what you're asking me, or the?
No, that the academy or the before the academy, just a list so that we could see the different types of businesses.
Yeah, so Academy has no one. It's a brand new program. So these we've worked with all these teams right here.
Yes, I got that. Are these the only ones?
No. Well, I would say this is the majority. This probably covers 85%. But if your question is around the different types of technologies, we have, like, for example, sensible photonics is diodes for the electrical industry. It's for basically letting power companies know when their transformers are ready to blow because of the temperature of the transformers. Okay to Stand Up is an app for patients with low blood pressure, hypertension, that when they try to stand up, this is typically elderly patients may fall down. So this provides a warning. Legal Triage is looking at contracts. Expressive penimation is a way of defining pain. If you know, when you go to the doctor, they give you either a smiley face or a sad face or a neutral face or a 1 to 10. This uses video and really descriptive pictures to define the type of pain. Is it pulsating? Is it sharp? Is it dull? Really innovative way to do that, which is a huge gap in medicine today. Oops, I don't know why my mouse keeps doing this. Sorry. I believe ThreadRight was a way of finding a vein for a phlebotomist so that they didn't miss it and give you that horrible bruise, hematoma. There's highly technical ones. Aneurysm, Smith or CAT7 is a way of predicting potential aneurysms before they happen. Let's see, I'm trying to find Vital Dent is basically a scaffold for replacing nerves when you do in dental work. So if you have a root canal, really keeping those nerves alive if possible, instead of having to neutralize them. Eubiotic is a way of controlling the gut biome to control weight. ChargeOR is a scheduling app for UPMC's anesthesiologists. Triple Variable Index is an surgical support software to be able to tell the anesthesiologist and predict a patient going into hypotension, which is quite dangerous. Lydia is a hearing device. We know that a lot of patients go to doctor's office. They really can't hear their doctor, but they're embarrassed to say it, and therefore they miss what the doctor's trying to get them to do. So this is a small, portable, cheap device that they can use during the visit. Peptide antibiotics was a peptide antibiotic, which was moving along quite well. That's a really important area. What I'll tell you, what really negated that opportunity was the cost. Antibiotics, they are super cheap, but some of these super bugs that are going around will require a different type of treatment, of therapy, and this was one way to do that. So I think you get the idea. Stop VTE, triple note, wheelchair coach was really to stop sores and to help the patient know when they should move and exercise, not exercise, but at least relieve the pressure from certain parts of the body. So does that give you an idea, Robin, of the different type of technologies?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Tony, it looks like we're just about out of time.
All right, I'm done. Let me just, so applications today, open today, and we'll leave the window open till the 31st. If you're interested, go to the website. Again, just go to the OIE website and look at Startup Academy. It's under programs. And then the application, there's a hot link there that you can use and go to the hot link. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any additional questions or anything else you want to talk about.
Thanks so much, Tony. It sounds like a great program. I know I've been involved in a few of the second year companies and projects, and it's been rewarding. And this looks like it's even better. It's improved tremendously. So I'm looking forward to participating.
Well, thank you, Dave. And obviously, we're going to need your input and everybody's input to make this better. We're just starting. We're new. But we feel this program is going to be state of the art. We did a lot of studies of other universities and what they did to get the companies out the door, and I think this hits on all the critical points. So really excited to implement it.
Well, thanks for presenting it. I'm going to turn off the recording.